I'm continuing to work with my dog and the theory of evolution and when on the origin of the species which has come to become. I have used Darwin's theory to prove that I can pretty much prove that I don't share common ancestry with the great ape. Pretty simply by linking up a little better with I'm not the descendants of Adam and Eve, and I accept that. I'm not them and they're not me. I'm German. And there's a Caucasian component here where I actually don't believe any of the Caucasians are related to Adam and Eve. So I'd like to explain to the Caucasians who kept the James Ussher chronology and the Bible through the medieval periods of the earth history that we kept a medieval manuscript, a legitimate big wow, I need to catch you and explain to you that we kept a medieval manuscript. And what I found here is a 1611 King James Bible that does not actually exist because it's not in print. So I am actually reading through this Bible that does not exist. A 1611, it says, viewing the original 1611 King James with archaic English spelling. And this particular King James Bible, being the Holy Bible, it contains a facsimile of some sort that can be looked and analyzed word by word and line by line. So I'd really like to just make this story short and tell you I've been spent 13 years doing this, and it's put into this new piece with this that we actually need to protect this as something that didn't exist. In my finding this weird 1611 King James Bible that is different than the 1666 version of the King James Bible. Because what I did recognize is that in 1611, the King James Bible itself had 75 books, known as the Apocrypha. This is the exact same as the Catholic Bible, right? Which gave to me in 1611, the Catholic and Protestant churches were the exact same. So what was the switch in orthodoxy? Where did we legalize the pulpit preaching with the switch to the orthodoxy exchange? It happened when we had priests raping boys and we ignored that was a medieval cult is what happened. And the only way to capture such an egregious series of mistakes where our medieval cult church systems broke, I'm purposefully trying to make record of how my medieval cult church system that which retained the James Ussher chronology even witnessed in 2007 a personal relationship with the dog, my girlfriend who's Seminole Indian, my personal relationship with the Native American communities in my area, and my personal relationship reaching out into the local communities, where I'm trying to say what we don't have is a missing link. Rather, we have a missing link to a missing theory that erased everything, calling it evolving. Yes, we evolved. We did that. That was a setting in world history. I'd like to actually just make a simple on and off argument to know that it's most likely apes did not invent writing, and just use that simple beginning point to see if my Baptist friends will sit down with me and discuss how we retained the James Ussher chronology without writing much about it, rather than just accepting a single written narrative in honor and memory of the closure of the Baptist church I was baptized in with the here's why we're going to just consider something together with our congregations, something we'll put out into our congregations and ask them, because it would not be right for us to make a ordinate change within the Baptist community. Yet again, like I witnessed, my church got expelled from Baptist rather than mentored back into the Baptist faith when we hired a cult teacher, so we got expelled. And so I've witnessed of the Baptist faith wherever we came from not really paying attention to the flock it wasn't maintaining. So I'm actually trying to ground the entire Baptist faith while we can turn off James Ussher, to be honest. And this is a really friendly request to turning off James Ussher. I found this personal, very, very personal. I'm making this very, very personal. I can't write to make this personal. I actually noticed an error in a sermon where the pastor retaining the 6,000 year earth legend, his error in his sermon gave me enough evidence using the 1611 King James Bible that does not exist in edition 2007 through 2020, willing to show up and just say, don't make a big deal about it. But what he did is at John 1:18 convinced himself that Exodus 33:11 and Deuteronomy 34:10 both meant something other than what they did. And it was an actual off switch for his sermon teaching to refuse his congregant who was correcting his error. And so what I've done is I've taken the Bible verse by verse, not to change what we know of it, but to correct the error of James Ussher and him refusing to discuss two verses and how they would affect their ministry and baptism, and why his refusal to work with his congregant who has known since he arrived. He was a 6,000-year-old earth held a medieval legend, and I've been working for 22 years to end this medieval legend is the true story. It's a lot of work. The ending of if we were to end the 6,000-year earth legend all at once, it would mean reorienting to immediately looking at what did we do wrong with our theory of origin if we called it evolution. What we did wrong, in my opinion, and what I'm simply saying, is we exited the Neolithic era without a plan and with the historical roadmap, in my opinion. So we have this historical roadmap through what I'm calling Neolithica, which would be all of the Neolithic settlements that show to us scientific evidence that NASA did not consider the 6,000-year teaching when they were taught the Neolithic settlements. So NASA themselves, seeing that they evolved, had enough information to compute that the great apes grew up to invent writing 500 years after the legend of Adam and Eve, which is an actual disappointment. When I'm working at a 6,000-year earth legend, we're retaining this. What that told to me is in an on and off way. We could grab the entire Bible all at once, sit down and handwrite it, and actually turn it off in less than an hour. And it turns off at memorizing it at the two verses that this pastor refused to acknowledge, admitted what they were to me. It was very, very personal. And I'm actually using this as his thank you. I'm telling my mother and father, I'm giving them the testimony that his cult ending is just a newspaper article in my local community, to be honest. But it does mean me giving me purpose and reason to reach out to all Baptist congregations and anything that held the James Ussher chronology, tap you on the shoulders and say, I learned how to turn off the James Ussher chronology. If you want world peace, this is how you end sermon preaching. And you then handwrite the Bible with your congregants in order to understand that the 100% of everything was embedded inside of the numerical coding of we didn't quite have perfect record to be gathering money and paying taxes on something that was sealed during the Middle Ages, still with King James, with James Ussher, 6,000-year earth teaching. So when 13 years, I went 100% in reverse, saying this could be what has come to be is I don't have enough room to express. Because it's not supposed to be written. It's supposed to be a commentary to my mom. Really, this is why our pastor has no choice but to retire, because he failed at reading the words of the Bible themselves, and he's actually failed as a teacher by not understanding two whole verses and refusing. What I've only been able to come is a numerical coded big medieval oops with James Ussher, a disappointing medieval oops. We retained James Ussher, and now I need to catch you where we kept him at, because in order to close the 500 years of catch James Ussher, and when did you invent yourself with writing 500 whole years after Adam and Eve were expelled from the Garden of Eden? I'm using that as my literal resource. You were expelled from the Garden of Eden. That was Neolithica. And all of that data was all of the shit that made it through the Dark Age. Told NASA they'll figure out in about 7 minutes. They already knew this happened. What happened is you accrued $250 trillion in debt and $22 trillion in debt, and you can't. The nicest thing I could do is explain, because you did that without recompensatory strategies to look behind you. We don't have one for the wall that Mr. Trump just built us, and that he immediately went through this impeachment crap. And I'm trying to say, as a Christian nation, that's not how we should treat our leaders who's doing an infrastructure project. So I'm reaching out and tickling my Baptist congregations, that working with some friends, we grabbed James Ussher. So why don't we all vote for Mr. President Trump as a Baptist, and just do that? If I tap you on the shoulder because I'm trying to figure out if you're part of the James Ussher conundrum, I can only explain it is we did not interpret the Bible correctly because of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and that the acceptance of the 9/11 jihad that was against us was the Bible was to be interpreted through the conscious awareness of opening up the Dead Sea Scrolls to what we could do with them with respect to our church systems, showing that our church systems were the vapor of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Were the vapor. Surprise. What I've actually found in saying our church systems were the vapor of the Dead Sea Scrolls, surprise, is that what I'm actually announcing is Ariel Sharon he needs to step down and say thank you for me doing this for him, because he is responsible for teaching on my country that my country did not have a proper understanding of those legends. Ariel Sharon type people are responsible to Mr. President Trump to teach those things that they're broken apart in their own countries, and they can't do that. So what I'm actually unleveling here is that if we accept a 9/11 jihad as our medieval church systems, and a simple wake-up reminder and where it happened, I'm showing to you where it happened over here in the 1611 King James Bible, which doesn't exist, which means you don't exist. In the year 1666, the Bible went kaplap, is all I can say. It is me picking out where did NASA have a magic water quasar factory, to be honest. It's really disappointing. What did we do? How did we evolve this internet with all of these pictures of great apes we could use to compare ourselves to, I guess? And then find out that we calculated whether great apes had the capacity to have the desire and need to write. And then when having the desire and need to write a lot about how these great apes grew up to become us, evolving into us, we fabricated a myth a mythos legend that banded into our education systems, that God actually needs an endpoint through our broken education systems and our broken church systems, is my simple place put. We retain James Ussher. I'm calling you over to think about that with me, because we retained James Ussher with the 6,000 year teaching and a Sermon on a Mount. I'm asking us to turn sermon preaching off and turn it on to handwriting each of the lines of the Bible with our congregants, to see how that will help us study the Bible better, because we have been teaching a 6,000 year earth legend that I am actually reporting how damaging effects in relationships, the baptized. I cleaning up the church I was baptized is why I took the Bible apart. So my notes are really my elder pastor who needs to retire notes. So if it's a note like, I'm sorry, share, anyone leading over in Israel, I'm taking your Dead Sea Scrolls from you and explaining just on Facebook, it has to do with 2 verses in the Bible you didn't know it existed, but yet prophecy in John 1:18 that actually told me you didn't understand it. So I had to witness the standing up pulpit preaching use of interpreting the Bible with making use out of John 1:18. No one has ever seen God, because what he sat there when this elder so perfectly with I can only call a John 1:18 delusional disorder of time. He disordered his brain somehow by refusing to read the words of his Bible, calling them legend for his 6,000 year legend, when I was trying to explain to him that the reason why he has no one in his church, and in the time he needed to show up and be expelled 5 years into watching people get down to 150 rather than down to 30, because they had consciousness to observe their mistake. We did not have that. So I have a 22-year pattern of just conscious mistake of permitting this cult teacher to continue with the James Ussher chronology. And I'm using this experience to expunge us of the 27 books. Take Jesus off the cross is my personal, please hear me out, with Matthew chapter 5, verse 1. That was not a sermon. Matthew 5 through 7, a 3-chapter sermon that there is no rabbi in all world history who has ever taught a 3-chapter sermon. How many preachers has stood there and attracted people willing to sit through all of that? That's not how it was written down, and it was not how it was. That Sermon on a Mount is a correction point. That was Jesus wrote that handwriting, and I'm reaching out 6,000 years ago, and Jesus wrote this. No, this thing is 100% broken, with 100% broken medieval surprise at James Ussher, with this really, really nasty 666 thing. I got to record myself because it's me giving testimony in animals about my dog, me giving testimony in animals about myself, and me giving testimony in animals about why the senile elder needs to retire for refusing to tend to his flock that he broke with the flock. That witness of and watching me being relation partners, ex-wife and current partner, both having grown up in those churches. Ex-wife was a Free Will Baptist, and a return to the I need to get something out of it because mommy and daddy wanted me to, made it back into a community um, marriage church that promotes irregularities to the point of not listening to each other. the current 2020 marriage construct of how we listen to each other, honor each other, and agree with each other, and be willing to listen was cause all of the marriage problems in the year 2020. I'm isolating every single relationship plop plop I've ever experienced with that Sermon on the Mount. We're waiting, so we're not listening to the words. We're waiting for God, Jesus to return, so we're impatient, not listening for the words. Well, no, what we have is a medieval manuscript we don't know how to read, and Jesus's return is not going to happen. There is nothing in the Bible. If we shape our heads up a little bit right now, use this opportunity in the year 2020 through the year 3020. Stop erasing ourselves for mistakes we're making, repair for our future generations the tumultuous debt. I'll help you. And what I'd like to do is just all take a break for 2 months and hear me out. Why that is actually something that needs to be done face to face, because it's a very personal story. It's a disappointing personal story, to which of even why I did it. It's become a major letdown, because it is. I've actually, it's not science in my opinion, because it is Google. When did man invent writing? 5,500 BC. That's really creative to evolve this computer on my lap. When did that happen? Lucky for me, I was in the Silicon Valley when we had the Y2K glitch, which was really a lack of foresight thing, and this is a lack of foresight thing. Of course, we're $22 trillion in debt. I'm using Facebook, bouncing around, saying that's what the Zohar told me to do. And I calculated Earth history at James Ussher, and it meant my church was broken. Duh. Open my eyes. Were my eyes really that dense closed? That's why I did it. Duh. This man needs to retire. And my experience with him for this proverbial, you actually need to stop pulpit preaching, because this man, his witness was no one has ever seen God. When I was trying to explain to him face to face God and Moses, Deuteronomy 34:10, Exodus 33:11 gave me so much more information that he just didn't have, that explained every mistake, every time I've ever heard him stutter, every time I've heard him stumble over a false idea, every time I've heard him wince in, like, I believe what I want. Fuck you. You're just a punk. I don't have to listen to you. He's a stubborn, arrogant senior and he's a pastor who refuses to take record of his false mistake. And so he is a stubborn, arrogant senior who refuses to take record of his false mistake. I'm using Facebook, I'm using this internet in order to account for him refusing to take record of him talking with a congregant who caught him in a mistake. And he refused to accept that the word said what they said. In a church I was baptized in, required to take every word literally. We're waiting for this. Always waiting for a final judgment. And I was telling him, no, this is a final judgment. My father's name is David. And this senile pastor, I'm putting together a bunch of information in order to keep record of me saying no more in that community for him. Have the community work with me to clean up a community who needs to be oopsed out. We can do that. It's a Hispanic community, and big enough changes, we need to do something and get him out of any authority. So that's mommy and daddy. He did this, and I'm doing this, haha, and I'm working for 7.7 billion friends. So I'm hoping to do a good thing here because he took God and Moses face to face. I'm working from this not real King James Version Bible of the Bible, which is why I'm not really real. I really like to consider this as, if world peace is possible, it is because you lost verse, record, or writing 500 whole years after Adam and Eve were expelled, and because you called that as legend, you created a legend of your origin of growing up from apes who invented writing in the year 3500 BC. On this internet, it's called When Did Man Evolve Writing? Shit like that. When we exited the Neolithic and Adam and Eve, the only transferable skill that they had was the written language. So they walked out being able to walk and write. They began writing maps, and in order so they didn't get lost, they began moving things around. But before we had the written language, Paleo Hebrew, through Adam and Eve, provided to instances on this earth, such as Australian Aboriginal, have remained there for 65,000 years, showed to me that they were there different at the same time. However, because we at $22 trillion in debt did not consider our actual legitimate look back and how quickly where we got from to where we're at to 7.7 billion is just cleaning up that kind of a dethroning Ariel Sharon for not taking accountability for the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's a literal, my goodness. Not only have I witnessed pastors preach wrongly, but I've witnessed pastors not understanding the Bible because they did not accept that the Dead Sea Scrolls did have relationship to their permission to teach it, is the best way to say it. And they had no permission to teach it in its state. It was more of a how do you take it apart into the medieval church systems that you built, the Catholic Church, the Protestant Church, and all church systems. And if I can level everything into, can everyone just get baptized Mormon, it would really help me with my need for you guys to all say we're going to actually tackle that medieval system, and as Baptists go in and do our jobs and take care of it. And I'm trying to round up all 6,000 year earthers, all Baptists, in order to work together to close the medieval system with the prophet, the medieval system with the Pope, the medieval systems. And we'll do this by removing our medieval system of James Ussher, supplanting it for a modern, useful system of Awana, in order to encapsulate what I'm only saying we can patch up without making a big deal about this to our kids, who are taught in picture format an earth history that we really didn't study very well. We didn't study, even the best of the best only studied kind of the sequences of where they kind of learned from it. The most arrogant and proud NASA scientists are humbled to God and Moses on this internet, not being joined with the face-to-face's friends. To be honest, that trumps all world history. What I'm calling it, this John 1:18 delusional disorder of time, is pastors have sermon preached, use John 1:18, no one has ever seen God, and did not use it to figure out what Exodus 33:11 and Deuteronomy 34:10, meaning that you were waiting for a single resurrective, let's just turn this whole thing off, as 7.7 billion of us hope and possibility, if that thing was broken. And it is. If God and Moses face to face is erased on a website that I'm having to say, let's go work and massage with the 6,000 year of teaching for a little bit and massage it out of this 1611 King James Bible, viewing the original 1611 King James Bible, and this is it. In the beginning was the Word, symbol, no control of it. So nothing, if we're working with 500 years, we're working with no control. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. There's a wiggle there in the Jehovah's Witnesses. We have a numerical coding fracture between the retention of the sentence as it relates with the Jehovah's Witnesses translations. And so kind of using this one as the one to build from where we broke, but it's based on, I studied the words of the Bible in a different way. It was, how can I turn it off? So that is why I'm saying that this is the Davidic covenant, so it is the same it was in the beginning with God. I'm willing to do and communicate verbally this story. It'll take about 2 months. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. You'll see this said in a few different ways. What this is referencing is that even the 1611 weird thing is quote unquote inspired. We got that word wrong. We have a weird association with the medieval oops that God would like us to take James Ussher and our education systems in the year 2020 and consider those two side by side. It would be very, very simple. While we have the technology and willingness to say, well, that is when man did first invent writing, and we're going to focus on these little hidden nuggets of we passed over information. With the most disappointing series of Passovers, the Bible was 100% passed over at those 2 verses. In the most unique way, what can we do with them? Figure out what happened to them and how we abuse our sermons. And that's to sit down and consider and write our retirement plans, to be honest. So I'm writing a retirement plan for this elder who personally used John 1:18, smugly and arrogantly saying no one's ever seen God. And I'm providing everyone church witness, if you want to close your churches based on your personal use of no one has ever seen God, meaning to me that I've tapped you on the shoulder saying you didn't understand face to face very well, and we could turn this off at that and sit down and exposit the Bible closer using modern technology rather than the 17th century memory. I can't tell if my phone is ringing. So the maintenance of the 17th century memory is kind of where I'm at. Where if I'm able to capture this maintenance of the 17th century layer of memory that's been forgotten as an oops, oh, there's my phone, as an oops rather than and as a blessing, oops, we didn't expect this. We could actually use that in with our Baptist congregations knowing of it. In the year 2020, what would happen is they didn't know we would remember them. I'm honestly of the opinion it is an eyes wide shut situation that my Baptist elder, senile elder, who refused to repent for driving my medieval Baptist church system into a medieval cult that reduced to no one aside from my grandparent, from my parents, has given me the opportunity to analyze my entire life as that system I was 10. I knew it was a cult from going to school and learning it was a cult, and then calculating in the Christian schools while they're teaching us and warning of us cults, how our cult was, we even looked. I even sat there with somebody. Oh, yeah, is your cult better than my cult? Type stuff. It was conversations like that. 13 years old, when we all knew we were in weird little mating cults. We knew that we were free to just not think about Earth history responsibly. And that's what I'm actually trying to say. Sermon Preacher has taught us not to consider Earth history responsibly. In this particular case, Sermon Preacher, who refused to discuss even 2 verses, their validity of his teaching in a 5-minute discussion as to, do you really not know what these mean? Yeah, they go to this other legends, and admit it like that. The only thing I can do is I witnessed it, and it's a repulsive witness. From a Baptist point of view, where now I have to send, if I can reach out to all Baptist congregations that the year 1666 the Bible went kaput, this is really my special request to you personally, based on his refusal to talk with me, refusal to meet with, discuss the problems in his church, refuse. He's just sitting there blindly and ignorantly refusing to accept his driving down, never having water in my baptism, all of that, making this into a eyesore cult that he recently did have nice paint. It's a beautiful building, but it's no one's in it. It's an eyesore. Why keep it open? It's a waste of my dog's air. He is so irresponsible locally, to be honest. And so, working with gotquestions.org, I want to maintain a very friendly relationship and say, you guys didn't know about this King James Bible, and you weren't supposed to, because it told you that you didn't know about the Apocrypha, and you weren't supposed to because you didn't know. And it was a protection, because we went too far away from center. We actually, as Baptists, we went too far from center, and we've lost the only thing that mattered, which was the fertility records, and that is a Winded Eve, breaker hymen, and that is a legitimate scientific question to pose on Facebook. And now I'm bouncing around Facebook saying Winded Eve, breaker hymen. Yeah, that's a legitimate question if you believe 6,000 years medievals, and that is kind of the same. When did we create a wedding ceremony, a wedding feast that would not be corrected? Well, when we did not calculate Earth history with when we personally became fertile. So it's never been a question that's been asked, as far as I could tell. So I'd like to capture this time where in 1850 we had an average age of menstruation at 17 years. I found one in 1200 AD that said 14 years. So this one's higher, but I'd also attribute that to the meeting more rodents back then and fighting out the bubonic plague and not writing much shit down. So 17 years to 13 years where we have the modern. Let's look behind us. A whole 169 years past Darwin, and say right before Darwin we had 17 years with the sacred 7 for this. I'm here to ask us to look at Earth fertility together, which is 17 years down to where are your children right now. My daughter was 12 or 13 when she first entered menstruation, and when she first did. So Eve did not become fertile until at least 130 years, where we have the literal written record of beginning with Seth. And what I'm expressing is I'm communicating to gotquestions.org. The Bible is a take me away and close me verbally because it was misused. That's all inside of it. reach out and touch you on your shoulders and say thank you. And that is with my pastor. I'm trying to figure out. So if you'll pray with me here, he needs to shut down. He needs to step out. He does not understand and he refuses to take accountability for what he's done. And this refusal to take accountability of the formation of all churches is how I've recognized that is we could level everything to zero at gotquestions.org just with the for 2-month thing as I continue to show up and say, let me bounce around Facebook and try to attract also a bunch of people because I'm expositing from this beautiful young earth medieval. Thank you. It's put into not only is it a beautiful Baptist thing, but we don't have that. Before I really took that apart into what do I remember from my junior high studies into why did we study just this fragment of the Apostle Paul? It was all about marriage. So the only thing I learned in church was something to do with mating. And that is all I learned to do, regulate mating and putting it into the sacred love union that was somehow we need to look at. We've never looked at it together. And if I'm asking us to look at it together, it's because it's messy. And it is because I'm seeing rises in birth defects. And I'm seeing this as a distance of time because James Ussher didn't know about Australian Aboriginal people. Therefore, the 6,000 year Earth website we can turn off right there at 65,000 years and consider them together as just that is why we would sit down and stop pulpit preaching if we could turn it off so simply. And on a change to what we learn for even having those buildings, and that is we're teaching our children how to carry that Sermon on the Mount handwritten with their knowledge of authority to carry that Bible out there. I know everything about this Bible, and if I don't know every word in it, I'm not going to even teach it. I want to put away. I'm actually expressing the only way to explain to you we don't know one word in it is because world history does not exist after the year 4004 BC, aside from this weird count back to something we can restore from. 6,000 year Earth legend. And on the 6,000 year Earth legend, it's a disappointment. But it's a unique, fascinating disappointment that concludes within the year 1666. And I'm almost through this little series of narratives on 1666. What this is turning into is I need to send a number of emails to people. Listen to this, listen to this, listen to this. Ask this question, answer this question, have you used this way? And why don't we talk about retirement for a lot of people as to their current teaching capacities and why they're doing it, and let us actually open our eyes. If we're teaching this James Ussher chronology to have a full congregational test of we are going to sit down for 2 months and not teach and see an improvement, if anything will happen, if we just teach our congregants how to handwrite the Bible. 2 months, just handwriting the Bible is my request to all young earth creationism. That is the Davidic covenant. It's a disappointment, but that is the Davidic covenant. So I'm recording myself handwriting the Bible and providing all of this record so there's enough hearing dogs and animals. So as I approach people with an argument that I am doing my best to argue scientifically using modern technology 160 years after a very good closable theory was written. I'm using modern technology in order to close the theory provided by Darwin. It's taken me 13 years. And it's been kind of like a little nifty, really, 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 really long time. Of course, if you're going to close a theory that you can't even talk about whether or not it's correct or not, you have to find weird ways to find what. You can't talk to your teachers because everything's evolving. You're in a state of evolution. You are evolving. You're not keeping record, is what I found. And I would like us together to stop at October 23, 4004 BC. When did man invent writing? 3500 BC, 500 years after the expulsion. When did this happen? When Adam and Eve had their only transferable skill, which would have been to write. Therefore, my only transferable skill is to handwrite the Bible, because Adam and Eve having their only transferable skill when they walked out into Neolithica with Australian Aboriginal during an unseen period of time that we said didn't exist, we didn't use in any world calculations anytime. So we use false world calculations from the beginning. It's kind of weird. And so they don't care. They already know the Earth's older than 6,000 years. And so they really don't care. So I have a lot of groups of people that really don't care. I was watching some of what I can only refer to as Neolithicus, Neolithic elements, where we were milking. This Neolithic element was in the not in the Amazon, but they lived in a primitive but well built, not it was hewn wood and not just wrought. They were sitting at a formal table, well built, poverty, just basic, and they had dogs, and they were milking their dogs, and they provided the man with the cameraman and the other guest who was interviewing them fresh dog milk, of all things. They had the capacity and technical knowledge to know how to milk their dogs, and they did it, and it was so an amazing thing. It just blew me away. Where it's like, we don't have that technology. What type of So I came up with this idea. We also don't have puppy soup technology, which is a Native American tradition. I'm going to say we're really, really, really hungry here, where we need some puppy soup. And I want to sacrifice my dog over in this old ritual order called the OTO that was kind of blasphemed and bastardized, but it helped me get to where I'm at. Willing to take on 7.7 billion of you if I can communicate to our Baptist congregations how easy we could use our sparks to go out and gather this data, and we will be the shining star of all world history when we do that. It's Christians woke up and figured out what was wrong. Is what Christians woke up and figured out what was on. We've always known our church systems have been broken, which is why those over there call it these over here cults, and these over here are saying we left that one for this one, and we're always bantering, never agreeing, never able to agree on the quantity of books, calling them sacred. The Bible, medieval, sacred unity to what? The end of the world, final judgment. That's medieval. We medievally magically poofed October 23, 4004 BC. That is a legitimate. I had a breakdown in my church systems. I was able to associate with that young earth creationism. That James Ussher himself was the reason to not make a big deal and just keep plowing away and keep plowing away. And even with I can't even talk about prophecy with this man because he doesn't know the words of the Bible. So he can't even read the prophecy because he's only reading it. Like, how does this legend fit in? How does this, I know my shallow legend of earth history and my shallow movement, but where did I come from? He's never thought of that. I don't think he has. Where the West was won in an area where we murdered and had Indian wars and stuff like that. So where the West was won, he's like, yeah, I got here over I'm a white guy from from someplace over there. I have no documentation or authority to teach the Bible, because he couldn't even look at the Bible and recognize repentance through the Dead Sea Scrolls, which meant he needed to repent at teaching a 6,000-year mystical magic mount, mystical magic sermon, 100% of everything within the Bible. If we look at, is the earth 6,000 years? Does this verse permit it? Type relationships? No, that meant that in this, that got broken over here and broke his sermons, is how I would like it to be understood, what I'm outlining here. His sermons were 100% flat earth, 100% young, immature. A young earth pastor is a open your eyes, eyes wide shut. You have a young earth conundrum where he is, something is on him, making him continue to use that book and teach it and gather false record with his behavior with it. There is something stuck on him. To continue and to teach it with, I am reaching out, then saying this is a global off, if we can pull this one off and try it. Because I guarantee you, within 1 year of just sitting down with our congregations and saying we were wrong about the age of the earth, we're at the year's 2020 and now we're cleaning up our church systems, following Mr. Rush on YouTube, on Facebook, and wherever I kept pop in. It's the one the Baptists were sung when we just read our Bible like this, to be honest, and we memorized our legend to how we were going to preach them. And I'm observing modern pastors stumble over words because and he always stumbled over his words. He'd collapse mid-sentence like a narcoleptic. I forget what he was going to say and bow his head. Okay. And he'd not do anything, but not admit that he forgot the word that he was going to say. Is he does that. We know these people. So out of honor and respect for this medieval poofer, I want to give him and Mr. Swagger the medieval poof movement together. Let's poof retirement checks to our staff and say we're done, and clean up our current organizations to poof out every word we ever misinterpreted the way I'm outlining, Mr. Swagger. And it's right around John 1:18, which told us this would happen, which told us this would happen. Which actually told us this, that John 1:18, delusional disorderment of time, is we need to remove the ornaments from the disorder. Yeah, that's it. Remove the ornaments from the disorder. And right now we have a 7.7 billion disorderment of remove the ornaments of Ariel Sharon messed us up. How'd that book get to Washington State? Why did I pick it up? These are legitimate. We didn't want it coming over here, so it kind of smuggled over here, and then we pushed it over here, and then we kept it. And I don't know. The West, where the West was won, and Baptist erased world history by keeping James Ussher and not cleaning up the medieval Catholic churches is a good assessment of me poking at the Pope, saying, let's dethrone the Pope while we get rid of Ariel and any leadership from anywhere. And this is big enough, it would do that for us if we want it. So thank you for hearing me out, and I'm still working with these guys, and I trust them. I'm watching, and I think we started to hit here. What I'm trying to do is sand, brothers and sisters, sand here. Prepare all of these rough edges. Oh, we broke right here. Can we put a picture of Mickey Mouse or something right here to say we broke right here? We were. I like that. I came back and checked right here, and right here. Can we have I'll send you a few pages like that on a few pages and get a routine to categorize the oopses around. And I'll send you a verse by verse summary of what this verse meant in context with the Dead Sea Scrolls. And then when we have what this verse meant in context, you will have the retirement package for my pastor, is what it is. Pretty please help me get this guy to step down and acknowledge his mistake in this, refusing to have this discussion with me. Help this man acknowledge his mistake by me grabbing it also on gotquestions.org and us not making any deal about it. It was a lot of work. Please. And it is the Dead Sea Scrolls. Please. And it is a new recognition to honor Jimmy Swaggart, please. It is closes down the Mormon Church to explain that through our understanding of this new idea of them being bad and us being bad, and we already knew it, and now we're going to go solve it, which we knew. Please, we'll do that together really, really quickly and easily. We knew it already. And it just meant we didn't look back at us to see how we also broke. And Joseph Smith told us how we also broke. Into if world peace is wanted, we're willing to do this for our young next generations. If world peace is wanted as a congregation, by sitting down and raise the hands, is world peace considered? What would it mean? Okay, it would mean returning to handwriting the Bible and not teaching it as the Bible told us is to be carried by our children who handwrote it. Brother will not teach brother, because our children handwrote it at 10, and all else just fit into place because we kept control of how we did that without it letting them take anything out of it and say it meant something else that it didn't mean, because they made money off of it. And just slap our immature pastors' hands at this moment, and then give their work to our children and give my pastor his retirement, saying, this was your job, you're done, thank you. We're working this together as the baptism congregation that you got kicked out of. Please, I'm reaching out to, I'm the last remnant of being willing to accept responsibility for this dead. We as a Baptist congregation need to come back in and say, you separated so long ago, now what happened to you? Now we are here to help you clean out. Is our responsibility of not coaxing this man in. We just rejected him. And he deserved it, because he's a cult. Best I can tell, I'm not going into that record, because we made a mistake, so we don't have it. We made a good decision, whatever we did as Baptists. So I don't have that data. I just have a request to help this man retire by glorifying Mr. Jimmy Swaggart into I did the same thing. Please, I did the same thing. Please, I did the same thing in the King James Version of the Bible on accident. Please, it's the exact same one. I found it through gotquestions.org and witnessing it in 2007 and then 17, and having gone from 2007 to 10 years there. So now I'm 2020, 3 years later, 5 years working with Darwin. This is a legitimate, let's just turn off Darwin now, if we can turn off the Bible at the same time, please, and kill those two. Our theory, our immature 6,000-year legend, and our immature apes grew up to become me legend. It requires the technology of the internet for us to do and just do together. It's part of the Davidic covenant. And that is the request to really consider the reality of what we've been taught before we vote again. And how our contributions would come to this request before we vote again. I'm asking my Baptist counterparts who are part of the James Ussher chronological delusion of time to consider just voting for Mr. President Trump and keeping him and letting him. He built us a wall. He owes us a maintenance plan. He owes us a reversal. Okay, my goal was here to get you out of debt because I'm in my second term. I'm going to come in and calculate the expense of being here and the expense of my work for you, and I'm going to turn back into my brilliant business expense, and I'm going to focus in on turning our country into a country that can return to what we had when Andrew Jackson, our seventh president, so long ago, had us down to zero after the initial exit when we first formed. And I'm sure we've had bumps and grooves, but we've been accruing. We've never had we have erased the mistake of all world history of not addressing our debt. We have actually erased the mistake in all world history of not addressing our debt. And God is saying we can use this internet to show that we're kind of a token to what we are capable of doing if we use this internet together and pull it and say, if we want to acknowledge with 7.7 billion of us, God sprinkled some magic fairy dust on the Bible, and he can do that to us. And it's because we're dense Baptist. It really is. We're dense Baptists. We're a surprise. We're kind of sperm donor baby things, and we need to look at our sexual nature as how immature we are with it. That's what my personal testimony is. As during this generation, when we are, what I'm trying to say is, in my personal history, an obvious breeding cult that because of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Cool. 13 years because of the Dead Sea Scrolls, the one we were expecting, Baptist. Please, love you guys.